Hello and welcome to another session of Sqoop. So here we will talk about incremental import. So what is incremental import? So let's understand this with an example. So here we have the data of customer. We have customer ID and customer name. So this is from the MySQL database. Let's take that example, right? So we have around 6 records here with customer ID and customer name. Now when you do a Sqoop import, you can basically do a select of this data, or you can basically query all the data. You can import all the data. So when you import all the data, what will happen is all this data will basically come and sit in your Hadoop system. So this will go and sit here. Now when you do a query, when you execute the query again, the same query, now if you put a delete target table, so basically you are overwriting this data will go and the new data will come, right? So that is one thing. If you append it, what will happen? The same data will go and sit as a duplicate, right? Which, let's say we don't want this. Now what will happen if you have this data here? After you import this data, you have couple more tables, a couple more records being inserted at the MySQL database. So let's say here 1006 is the last record that we have. So once you, after you have imported these records, there are two more records that has come up, let's say 1007 and 1008. So these are the two records that have come here, right? Now if you do a Sqoop import again, what will happen is, if you do an override, it is going to import all this data and it is going to replace this data. Okay, so this way you are, anyway you are getting all this data. But the thing that I wanted to point out is, why do we have to import all this data again? We have already imported this data up to 1006. We have imported all this data. All we have to do is, we just need this data to be imported, right? Why do we have to do it again and again, right? So we just need this particular amount of data. So this data should come and sit here. So even next time when you execute the query again, if new data comes up, it should pick only those data. And if no new data is coming up, it just should not disturb the existing data that is available here. It should be as it is. Any new data that is coming up, it has to import only those data. So this way we are limiting ourselves to not import the whole data. So this way, by limiting ourselves to import only the new data, we are basically increasing our performance. Because if the data is like say 1 TB or 100 GB, then importing the same data again and again might be costly, right? And it's also not good practice, because you may write some statement in your query where you want to import when was this record imported. You might have the current timestamp, so that gets replaced when you re-import the entire data. So when you import a portion of the data which is like in incremental fashion, that is called as incremental import. Here we are incrementally importing the data, only the newly added data we are importing it, rather than importing the whole data. So this we can achieve using the incremental import option. So this is the command for incremental append. So again, most of them are similar. Like we start with Sqoop import. We have the connect identifier. So you give the username, we give the password, the number of mappers, the table names, the split by, we give the target. So then last three are the options which are different. So one is incremental append. So this signifies that we want to do an incremental append. Now when you want to do an incremental append, how do you know that the records that are present are new records or not? So you need a comparison, right? You need a column for comparison. So that is the column that we say. So in this case, we have taken customer ID. So normally a primary key column or a date column is good. So a primary key column customer ID, we have taken it. So we are checking this column. So we are saying, we are giving this, okay, this particular column last value is 0. When we say this customer ID last value is 0, it will pick up all the records which are beyond this last value. So when I execute this query, it will basically query the MySQL database as select star from the customers where customer ID is greater than 0. So all the data which is greater than 0 will come up. So next time what we have to do is we have to change this last value to whatever the last value that was imported. So if I say last value is 10, then it will input all the data whose customer value is greater than 10. So that's how you are importing only the latest data, right? So let me just go ahead and execute this. Okay, so this is the command that we have to execute. So let me go ahead and execute. You can see, right, they are checking for customer ID which is greater than 0 because that's the last value that we have mentioned, and it has imported all the value. Now if you see here, right, the last options, it says it's an incremental append. The check column is basically on customer ID, and the last value that was imported is 12435. Okay, so this is the last value that got imported. So let me go ahead and check this. Let me go ahead and check this data. So it is there in customer. And now remember, we are not using delete target because that's not the purpose of this. We don't want to override it, rather we want to append it. So let me go ahead and check this. So we have two files, and let me check the data here. So the last value is 12345. Now if you execute this query again, what it will do is it will basically check all the data which is greater than 0, and it is going to import all those data again, which is basically a duplicate, right? We have already imported the data up to 12435. So we'll have to say this is the last value that was imported. So anything beyond 12443, 12435, anything beyond that, import only that record. So those records will be imported and put it into a separate file. Now here in our case we don't have any such records, so it should not import anything. So let me execute this. So if you execute anything, it should not import any data, right? So it says no new records detected since last import. So this way, unnecessarily, if there is no data, if there is no new data, we are not importing it. So this is a good practice. This is good, right? This is how incremental load should happen. So let's try by adding two records into the MySQL database. So I have the insert statements here. I am inserting two records. Basically, I have given a very big customer ID for both of them. So just to differentiate it, right? So let me go ahead and execute this insert statements. So let me do a simple select query. So I have these two records executed. So these two records inserted. So I have these two records inserted. So let me go back and I'm going to re-execute this query. So this time I have two records which are greater than 12,435. So I should only import this sqoop command should only import two records, right? So let's check if it is doing that. So you can see here, right, it says retrieve two records. So it has only retrieved those two records which we have inserted, and the last value is again updated. So this time the last value is 99,999. So let me go ahead and check this directory again to see those two records. So I have two more files which has been generated. I think each file should have one record. So I'll quickly check this file. So it has 99,998 record, and I'll check the other file which should have the other record. Great. So this way we are doing an incremental import. All we have to do is we have to make sure that we change this last value. Now this is a very manual process, right? How can you always remember the last value? You execute a command, you schedule it, you can just keep remembering the last value, right? Sure, you can basically export this to another file and then read that file. All those things can happen, but there is a better way of doing this. You can create a Sqoop job, you can give it a name. So what will happen when you execute the Sqoop job is it is going to execute the import statement which is associated with that Sqoop job. Now this import statement is going to be executed. It will have the last value. The first time you have to give a last value, the initial value, and then once the Sqoop job is completed, the last value that is generated basically from the log here, that last value will be stored in the meta store. Now the Sqoop will refer to that meta store and then it will replace that last value with the one which was stored there. This way we don't have to remember anything, right? So this is a great addition, correct? Just jump ahead and create this Sqoop job. It's quite simple to create a Sqoop job. So this is our Sqoop import, right? We have the Sqoop import here. So this is a query that we want the data, we want the Sqoop to execute on the table and generate this data. So we're not going to make any changes here. So it should be as it is, except that we want to start all over again. So we will say this value is 0, and then what we have to do is we have to create a Sqoop job on top of it, right? So here one small change that we have to do is between Sqoop and import there has to be a double hyphen. Now remember, there has to be a space between this double hyphen and import, right? So this is important. Now we say Sqoop job hyphen hyphen create my job. My job is the name of my job which will be created. So this is the Sqoop job. So let me go ahead, or before that let me just change this directory. So we were using customer ID, so what I'll do is I will change this to customer underscore job, right? Okay, let me go ahead and execute this. So a Sqoop job is basically created, right? Now you have to execute this Sqoop job. Now when you execute this Sqoop job, what will happen is internally this Sqoop command will get executed and that data will get stored. Okay, to execute the Sqoop job, I should say Sqoop job execute exe then I have to give the Sqoop job. What was my Sqoop job? It's my job, right? Yeah, it's my job. So let me go ahead and execute. So it is asking for a password, so I'll give the password, and the Sqoop job is now getting executed. All right, so it has retrieved 12,437 records. So those are the records which are available in the MySQL database as of now. So if I go back and check this target directory, I should see all those data. So I'll do a simple HDFS ls to see how many files, and we got 2 files here, and if you check these files you should see all the data that are present in the MySQL database. So you have 12,435. Then if you look at this mapper, you should have the remaining 2 data. So this is fine. So what will happen if I execute the Sqoop job again? So let's just check that. If I execute the Sqoop job, so it simply says there are no new records since the last import, right? We didn't mention anything, right? Here we didn't mention the last name, we didn't mention the last value, but still it picked up the last value from the meta store. So let's do one more thing. Let's just add 2 more columns here. So I'm going to say I'm just going to add some random values. The only change I'm doing is on the customer ID, because we're not worried about the other columns data. We just wanted to check if the data is getting imported properly or not. Only those two column data, only those two data. Okay, so we have this two data. We have imported this two data. So I'll go back and execute my Sqoop job again. And this time what it has to do, it has to pick up only those two new records which was just created. And at the same time, we have not used the last value. So this is very important to remember. We haven't specified the last value. That last value is basically something which is picked up from the metastore. You can see here the customer ID greater than 99,999. So that was the last value which we got while executing the Sqoop job before, right? So again, only two records have been imported, and that is because of this particular condition where this is the last value that it is getting picked up. So this way it is remembering the last value and it is only executing those particular last value here. So this way we are able to import the data in an incremental fashion. So you have the two new records here. Okay, so this is great. Now if you want to check the metadata of the Sqoop job, so you can say Sqoop job show, you give the name of your job. In my case it is my job, so it will give all the details here. So you can see here, right, the target directory, if the table is existing, what is this incremental mode, is this append mode, and somewhere here you should also see the last value, right? So incremental last value, so this is the last value that is getting updated. So Sqoop is going to use this data from here and it is going to replace this particular data with the Sqoop import command that you have given. Now once a job is created, once a Sqoop job is created, you cannot edit the Sqoop job. You just have to delete that Sqoop job and then you have to create a Sqoop job. That's one of the things here. And if you want to see the other Sqoop jobs that are present, you basically put a list and it will give you all the list of Sqoop jobs that are present, available jobs. Right now there is only one job, and if you want to delete the Sqoop job, you can say Sqoop job delete, and you give the name of the Sqoop job that you want to delete and it gets deleted. So if you query to see the list of Sqoop jobs, you should find no Sqoop jobs, available jobs are none. So this is how you can do an incremental append or incremental import. I hope this was clear, and I'll see you guys in the next class.